Hello everyone, Mike Arnold here, co-founder of Path Trading Partners along with Bob Iacino. How is everyone doing? Going to try to get through this weekly stock sector overview. To help us prep for next week, some of you know, still having technical issues. My streaming and recording computer blew up, in case you didn't see the live streams, and so I'm hobbling along on an improvised setup. So just trying to get this still out for everyone, but it won't be as good as normal. Only have one camera set up going, so you'll see me look away at the other screen for the time being. Would rather get this out than have it perfect. By the way, see, there we go. Let's see here. Let's see if this works. There we go. See, another technical glitch. Gonna get through this. If you are new here, please give me the benefit of the doubt and consider subscribing, or at least coming back to check out the channel multiple times. If you do subscribe, ring that bell and hit the like button. Longer term subscribers, please come back even with uh, the technical difficulties. Like the video and leave some comments. Again, I am sorry, just trying to get through this. It's been one heck of a weekend. All right, XLE energy sector, we're looking at it here. We still have still in long-term buy mode. Interesting setups though here. Triggered a double bottom. Triggered with the closing basis. Pulled back here, and now we actually have a double top. If this double top triggers and goes all the way down, it would invalidate the double bottom, and we'd pretty much be stuck, still possibly in long-term buy mode, but really in wait and see. So I am minorly bullish still because it's long-term buy mode. Long-term buy mode still on our setup over here, but we're waiting to see. Now, if we jump back up, I got to give the benefit of the doubt to the short-term double. However, if we get a close below 69.66, I'm with long-term bias, short-term bearish. Sort of overall, that would be a neutral position, so it would be hands off in energy. Now, if it rotates back up and we continue on our merry way with this potential double bottom, then I will start looking for more significant plays in the energy sector. So keep an eye on that. It's sort of a mixed message, and the beginning of the week will really decide which direction we are headed next in the short term. XLRE. Remember, our potential double top did not trigger because you cannot have it trigger on a gap open with a close above the peak. This confirmed it but did not trigger it. And then you see continued to run up. That's why we wait for the trigger confirmation, forming a triple top area up here and then breaking out. So here was the triple top right here and then breaking on high. Remember, triple top by a couple percentage points favors a continuation. And I'll go into that in another video, how you rectify a double top with a triple top and how it all works together in a double bottom with a triple bottom. But that's a little too much for now. Next target's up, still pretty much closing at the 50-day into a clear path move. So I can consider real estate. However, topping is daily cycles are at the topping pattern. Weekly cycles are at the topping pattern. So I'm more watching for another roll pullback move, and long term we're in a sell. So if we start rolling over this week, hands off on this. Now, key support coming back at about 41.60 to about 41.80. That's right in this area. That's if I can get lines drawn. That's right in this area. You see right here between these two lines. Especially then if we drop back below about 41.36, it's hands off. It's hands off with cycles on the daily and the weekly. And when I talk about cycles, we're looking at the bottom lines down here. So whenever for the cycle, go down all the way down on the bottom here and look where those lines are. This is weekly cycles at the top because I'm on a weekly chart, and you see daily cycles on the top. So when weekly and daily cycles are matched, we watch for the rollover pattern. We get the rollover pattern, you can get the exaggerated move to the downside, okay? Versus when cycles are at a mismatch. Let's say weekly was at the bottom, daily was at the top. Then we'd watch for a minor pullback on the daily to reestablish the daily being at the bottom and the weekly being at the bottom. Vice versa. for topping, but you got to be really careful when everything's at the top like it is in XLRE. So real estate, pretty much staying clear if those cycles roll over at the beginning of this week. XLF, interesting enough, long term, still sell mode. This was a weekly pattern, this weekly double. Why was I not waiting for a daily close? Because of this choppy multiple bottom on the daily. And this is what I'm referring to. When a pattern gets really sloppy on one time frame but is still valid on the higher time frame, you see it here on the weekly, you gotta wait for the close on that weekly basis. And what did not happen? It was not a weekly close above 32.87. So with again, weekly cycles at the top, daily cycles at the top and rolling over. So I'm pretty much sticking clear and in long-term sell mode. So unless we really start breaking above last week's high of 33.16, I'm sticking clear. If we do break above last week's high, then my targets are 33.88 and 34.38. But that did not trigger on a weekly basis, so it needs a breakout play on the daily basis before I start looking at things in the financial sector. XLK, still long-term sell. XLK triggered the double on the weekly, and this one, even with this pullback, did not invalidate it, and it triggered it on a daily. So this could be played on a daily basis, and you see here on the daily basis coming up. This did not invalidate it. It has pulled back down to this area, this 124.50 area. That would have made it only playable on the weekly. I'm giving some longer term subscribers a few more hints for putting up with my technical difficulties of the best way to play these things. With this pullback in technology, we have a lot of technology earnings this week, okay? It's now got to stop reduction on this double that triggered on the daily. Remember, we can easily pull back to the breakout area. What would get me hands off on technology, though, is if we get a close back below 132.80, which would be back below the daily rotation zone. Why so aggressive on that level? Because cycles are at the top on the daily. Cycles are at the top on the weekly. And we just hit the other side of the weekly rotation zone and bounced back from those levels. So this is why if we do continue, if we start getting bad tech earnings, and we got a little preview with stuff like Snapchat, but Snapchat is not a major market mover. But we got Google, we got Alphabet, we got Apple coming up this week. We got some big boys coming up in terms of earnings in technology. So that's where it's like, okay, I got to play this with long term. We're still in sell mode, and here's what I'm talking about. On Tuesday after the close, Alphabet, Microsoft. We got Meta, Qualcomm. I mean, Etsy's very minor, but it'll be interesting. We got Spotify before the open, and I know it's a streaming service, but it's still somewhat viewed as a tech thing. We got Logitech on Monday. What else? We got Infosys before the money, a big consulting firm in tech. We got Thursday's major. You got Apple, Amazon, and yes, Amazon, even though it's got that consumer with their whole retail stuff, Amazon Web Services is most of their revenue, keep in mind. So that's going to be a biggie. I mean, Roku, it's just going to be interesting. But Intel's not as big as like Apple or Amazon, but is big. So you got some big things going on. So if we start seeing some poor moves in tech, or especially, let's say they hit or slightly beat, but then they guide for third quarter, and the guidance is not good, then we could see this pull back rapidly. That's why I'm very cautious, especially still in long-term sell. Now, even if this did come up and finish the pattern, especially the second target on that little double, it's still, I'm watching for the rollover play, especially with cycles at the top. So unless there's something in outperform that has a major earnings play, I'm waiting for these earnings to pass and then looking to reestablish stuff in tech if it is warranted. XLI, we're just in a challenging market condition right now. XLI still in long-term sell. Yes, now this is different. Okay, let me go through this one. This was pretty much a triple bottom, especially this could be considered one side of the bottom, but with this push down and then the final push down, it was a triple on the daily. All right? But how's this different from the other one? It triggered on the weekly. Now we still are in weekly sell mode. Cycles at the top on the weekly, cycles at the top on the daily. But if this can sustain above the daily rotation zone at 88.50, I will look for industrial plays. If it can't, and if we get the pullback with this rotation zone and gets the close back below this, it's hands off until I get another rotation back up. Also, we have not hit the stop reduction. So this whole pattern comes off the table at this point. This whole pattern comes off the table if we get a close below about 86.50. Below 86.50, forget about it. You know, that double's done. But I will look, especially if we roll over and sustain above these first cross the weekly rotation zone, I'll still watch for some short-term plays in industrials. I'm just cautious because of where those rotation zones are. But this did officially trigger, and it also did close this big weekly gap. XLY, consumer discretionary. I was watching to see, now long term, we're still in sell mode. I was watching to see we've hit the daily on the other side of the weekly rotation zone, which is flattening out. I was seeing if we could close the week above this key gap open back from the 6th of June. We could not. We're in long-term sell. We got weekly cycles at the top, daily cycles at the top, and starting to roll over. So I am not really touching consumer discretionary. What I want to see is a pullback level now. And I shouldn't have taken that off. Our first major pullback level I'll be watching to see if it supports is this is a prior breakdown zone. Then it became support again. And we have the rising rotation zone. So now that's my first area to watch for the support holds. If we get support holding, then a rotation back up, I'll be interested again. But right now, with cycles at the top, I'm watching for that pullback. And then if we come back down, break that support, and come back down and close back below roughly about 146.30, with cycles rolling over on the daily and weekly, not touching consumer discretionary, especially with weekly hitting the other side of the rotation zone. So then that will be completely off the table. XLP, very interesting. Consumer staples. Still technically in sell mode long term. But look at this nice basing sideways. And the only reason we hit sell mode was this exaggerated June 13th. But we start breaking out, especially get back above the 75 level, it's back into a major buy pattern. Now, short term, I am keeping an eye on this because it is basing right at this level. It's been able to withstand selling pressure. And look at this. There's been a lot of dip buying. I'm watching it because cycles are at the top on the weekly. Cycles are at the top on the weekly. Not yet on the top of the daily, but potentially rolling over. However, if we can get a breakout above about 73.40 on a closing basis, and then follow through with a close above 74.25, I'm really interested in consumer staples again. Why? Because it'd be front running this potential massive double bottom. Consumer staples, especially consumer staples that have a value component that aren't overvalued fundamentally and have pulled back a bit, those could be the good plays, and we could see a return to the late April, early May high area if that double does trigger. So that is really on my radar screen. XLV, the healthcare. Healthcare is shifted back to, if you're aggressive, it is shifted back to buy mode. Weekly cycles at the top and starting to roll over. Daily cycles not yet to the top. I will look for any healthcare plays on a minor basis if they are in outperform mode. What I really need healthcare to do is get a close back above 132 roughly. That would take it back above the 200 simple moving average. and complete this pattern above the 62.5 with hitting that 87.5. It just missed here. And then a potential return to 134. So if this starts breaking out, I get much more aggressive in healthcare. The only hesitation right now is weekly cycles are at the top and looking to roll over. So I am cautious unless we get the next breakout play. Now, for any bull case, if we start getting a daily close back below about 127.50, hands off at all in the whole sector for the time being until cycles get to the bottom. XLB. XLB, still in long-term sell mode. This is the materials sector. Coming off pretty aggressively, getting cycles to the top on the daily, getting cycles still at the bottom. Now, this is what I'm talking about with a mismatch on the cycles. You see here, cycles at the bottom on the weekly, cycles at the top on the daily. So how do I like to watch for this? I like to watch for a slight pullback move, because a slight pullback, even if it's choppy, it can pull these cycles back down, and then when these start rotating up, we could get a more medium-term buy signal in materials. So now I'm hands off on this because it's got a long-term sell until we get these daily cycles pulling back. If we get these daily cycles pulling back, then I'm watching for more material plays. XLC, still in long-term sell. Like Verizon came out with earnings and they were not good. XLC daily cycles at the top and rolling over, and you see a nice big gap down and then follow through. Weekly cycles at the top and looking to roll over, spike into the weekly rotation zone, only managed to get back poking above that rotation zone on the weekly and trying to do a breakout and then snapping back in the channel. Starts breaking below 55.13. Watch out below. We'll retest the lows based off of statistical probability. With this would be then a shake and bake pattern. People get sucked in, turning back down, and then breaking down the other side. I am not touching anything in communications right now due to long-term sell, due to cycles at the top on the daily, and due to the spike into the weekly rotation zone and starting to roll over. Watching for new low prices in XLC. XLU, still in long-term buy mode, trying to make a decision here where to go. This is again is utilities. Cycles at the top on the weekly, cycles at the bottom on the daily. If the yields start dropping in the 10-year note, I should say the notes, the 10-year notes. If the note yields start dropping and we have a potential inverse head and shoulders, if that triggers, I will be much more aggressive on utilities with yields start dropping. If yields start rallying, not doing anything, especially with the weekly cycles rolling over, barely holding on to buy mode, and the daily cycles at the bottom, this is sort of a mismatched pattern. It's all going to depend on where notes trade this week. And we have the Fed meeting on Wednesday. So post-Fed meeting, I'll be looking at utilities more. So post-Wednesday afternoon, I'll be looking at utilities more, especially if they strengthen up. If they weaken after the Fed meeting, then hands off till next week from my perspective. XRT, the retail ETF, still in long-term sell. You can see here, we triggered the daily double and running up straight to the exact target. Pausing just in front of the second target, which is the higher probability one in this one because it exceeded this move. You can still play it, and it ran up there and then reversed. Based off of that and still in long-term mode, I'm now hands off at that with cycles at the top on the daily, cycles at the top on the weekly, spiking in the weekly rotation zone and rotating back down. I am not touching retail at this point until we at least get cycles back to the bottom on the daily and the weekly and see how this pullback lasts. Especially if the pullback starts closing below 61.70, it's all over for me for the time being, at least for the next little while in retail. IYT, transportation. This is another interesting one. You can see the double on the weekly. The double on the weekly, we needed a close above the high of 22254. The close was 22268. So that technically triggered on the weekly. Why did I need a trigger on the weekly? Because this turned into a triple on the daily. So now I'm watching with transportation with cycles at the top on the daily, cycles at the top on the weekly. This is nothing to chase right now. I'm watching for the pullback move. The first area of support is 220. The next major area is about 217.50 to about 217.80. We get a close below this 217.50 area. I'm waiting for another pullback, and if it drops back below on a closing basis 211 roughly 70, then the double is over. But if it pulls back here with cycles at the top on the daily and holds and then starts rotating back up, I am watching for transportation plays. All right, even though it's in long-term sell mode, it's trying to come out of this long-term, at least form at bottoming weekly double, which the targets are 229.54, and then next major area about 233. And that would take it to the return to the weekly rotation zone. So that's why I'm keeping an eye on that sector for plays. DBC, commodities, still in long-term buy mode. We had this double on the daily that has not triggered yet. Let me now see where we sit. Let me check something here because I'm working on a new way with double. All right, we got to go off that. Still not triple bottom territory. So this is double is still valid. Now, if we come back down here in this area by the 200, especially with cycles at the top, it would be a triple bottom. And it would not be, you could not spot it on the weekly. So that would be hands off for anything with commodities still. Now, if this starts bouncing and we had to close below 26.16, I'm back into full-blown bull mode in commodities. All right, so right now it's really got to hold up with cycles rolling over on the daily and at the bottom on the weekly. We got to get that turn up move pretty soon. Now, if this double gets invalidated, I then need to see another buy signal to get interested in commodities. Ag, you can see here, the double is now a triple, never triggered because it never got above this peak. So that is off, and this favors a continuation pattern. And we entered long-term sell a couple weeks ago. So it's all hands off in the agriculture aspect of commodities for now. SMH, we're still in long-term sell. Everything's rallying off the short-term moves, especially with that semiconductor bill in Congress right now. But again, I'm watching for another long-term rollover pattern. It's still in long-term sell. It's still in long-term sell with this head and shoulders pattern. So this, again, will be long-term sell right now. The short-term is just semiconductor plays pending that bill. Where your key support now is back to about 223.02 to 223.02 to 221. And if it drops below there, you don't want to see it drop below 215.50 on a closing basis. If it drops below there on a closing basis, I'm then targeting new low positions, especially with cycles at the top of the daily and not yet at the top of the weekly. So could this run a little more or be choppy to the upside? Yeah, but your major plays, remember we had that double in NVIDIA and that already completed. So if I can find a very short-term play in semis, I might be interested, but longer term still there or coming off the table again. Gold miners, GDX. I'm watching actually for a nice 5-wave, Elliott wave bottom pattern coming in the next couple weeks. Then I'll be interested in GDX again, but nothing there yet. VTV still have this potential Vanguard value. On a closing basis, 135.97, get a daily close even above there. Triggers a buy pattern. So then I will really be looking again at value stocks, 139.35, 141.12, 142.71. Where does that look like on the weekly? Cycles are at the top but not rolling over again on the daily. We might have a rollover play, so we might get one pullback before that potentially triggers. So at the beginning of the week, not interested at all. I really need this to trigger before I'll get bullish. And long term, it is still in sell mode. Now, if this double does trigger, I actually have to update these. I have to update that. Then this could take it back to long-term buy mode once we get to that first target, 139.94, 141.93, 143.92. So if that does trigger, I'll get really aggressively looking for value plays. Growth is still a long-term sell. Triggered. This was not a triple bottom. It did not rotate down far enough, so this could still be played on the daily. Close above 236.20, hitting the first stop reduction target. So I'm now watching for a pullback area with holding the daily rotation zone. So your first support level is roughly about 236. What I don't want to see is a close below 233 in the short term. So if I can find any growth plays that are still working, that could work. And where you don't want it to close below because it takes the double off the table is you don't want to close below 225, roughly. That takes the double off the table, and then I go into more aggressive sell mode with growth stocks, especially with cycles at the top on the daily, cycles at the top on the weekly, and a return into the weekly rotation zone, which is where we watch for the rotation rollover. Could this still pop higher to the next target on the weekly rotation zone? Yes. And then could we get the major rollover play? Yes. That's why I'm being a little cautious because that daily double triggered, but it did hit the first target. So that's why I'll get really cautious if we get the close below the daily rotation zone. All right. Thank you for putting up with any technical difficulties. Hopefully I'll get everything sorted out in the next week. I appreciate you tuning in, and with that, I will talk to everybody on the live streams. Bye for now.